I was with Rudy once in his apartment. We were talking and the TV was on in the background, which it often was. And the news was on. And a Tibetan monk set himself on fire, sitting in the middle of a street. And I was kind of stunned by it. And Rudy just stared at the picture of this monk burning. He turned to me and he said, "You have no idea how hard that man is working." And I've never forgotten that. And I mention it today, and this is kind of ridiculous, but this room was very cold while we were sitting here. And every one of you related to that cold in a different way. Some of you were actually somewhat comfortable. You had enough clothes on, enough things to keep you warm. Others of you were very uncomfortable. And I was definitely cold. And for the last 2 nights, we're staying in an Airbnb with the worst comforters, no blanket, just these comforters that either make you 90 degrees, 96.8 degrees, or 98.6, whatever it is our body temperature is, underneath the comforter, so you're so hot. Or you take it off and you're so cold. And Blanche and I tried every strategy we could find, turning the heat up, turning the heat down, everything to try to get comfortable, and there was no comfort. I mean, the night before or last night, and we thought we mastered it last night and had not. And I kept thinking, oh my God, I've got to teach today, and I'm going to be exhausted. And in truth, I barely slept, and Blanche barely slept. And midway through, I was just really angry that life was tormenting me, that it wasn't giving me comfort. Because we in America, in the Western world, have taken comfort for granted. You get in your car and immediately you turn the air conditioning on to get the temperature you want. You turn it down, you open the window, you close the window. You find your way into a very, very sweet spot that we basically inhabit. And we live in that sweet spot, and we believe it's our right to have that. And we really believe that if it's not there, that we're being punished on some level. That somehow you've gotten yourself into a terrible predicament because you're not at ease with what's happening inside you or outside you. And, it's a real problem because you try to figure out, what now? What am I dealing with here? And I remember being on a canoe trip with a whole bunch of us in Bloomington, Indiana many years ago, and my son Josh was with us. And in the middle of the trip, this unbelievable wind came up and this rainstorm came up, and it was freezing. Out of nowhere, nobody prepared for this, none of us. And we had at least an hour to go until our canoes got to the pickup spot, and we kind of all lashed ourselves together so we were like in one floating unit because everybody was really huddling and freezing. And my poor son looked at me, and I could tell how unhappy he was, and that this isn't fair and this isn't right. It was a summer morning and it shouldn't happen. And I said, welcome to real life. And it was an important lesson for him and an important lesson for me because there was nothing I could do. I could hold him, which I did, but there was only so much comfort to be provided. And there are times in life where comfort is not available. And anyone watching the news these days is watching masses of people in extremity. People in terrible, terrible straits, leaving everything they have behind, ultimately leaving their lives and their comfort for who knows what, a total unknown. And you look at these people and you go, there but for the grace of God go I. And you go, how would I deal with that? And again, in America, we're so rarely challenged by anything at that level. Life is so gentle with most of us. It's so easy with us that we can actually curse the world because it didn't provide us with enough, the right blanket, to find my comfort zone. And I lay in bed last night trying to go, well, clearly this isn't going to change. I can't find the right space for myself. What is the best response? Because it's not the end of the world. It's just discomfort. It's just a kind of ill ease. And so I just kept thinking, what's the approach? And I kept thinking of the Japanese Buddhist monk whose teaching was very simple, and I've talked about it many times, but it really, really works. And his response to everything is aso. Aso. And in the story of this monk, at one point a woman next door comes over to him with a baby and says, "You're the father of this baby," which is totally impossible. And she gives him the baby to kind of take care of her particular problem. And he takes the baby and he goes, "Aso." And he takes his baby. And he starts to raise this baby for 1 year, 2 years, whatever. And he's a loving parent. And then the woman decides she finds comfort in a marriage, that she tells the truth and the baby is hers. And she comes back and says, "I want my baby back." And he goes, "Aso." He gives her the baby back. His whole approach to life is aso. So I kept trying it last night. I kept going, aso, aso. And, it's not perfect. It's not totally easy, but it gets you through. It really gets you through the discomfort. The fact that life isn't giving you exactly what you want to cuddle you and to make you feel embraced and to make you feel warm. You go, aso, aso. And I got through the night. And I kept realizing, you're not going to fall back asleep. You're not going to enter dream sleep. You're not going to get the comfort that you want. You're not going to get the whatever nourishment you want. And it's going to be hard tomorrow. And I went, okay. And then I watched the day unfold. And I watched how it flows totally independent of me. That the energy arises, it flows out, it delivers itself, not because of me, not even really through me. It just happens. It just happens. And you realize that there's life that goes on no matter what, whether you're comfortable or not comfortable, it continues until it doesn't. And then there's real extremity. Real, what do I do now? Now, none of us are in that position. None of us are really having to deal with you're adrift at sea, alone in the ocean, and no one's going to rescue you. None of us are sitting on an airplane that clearly is headed to disaster. None of us at this moment has had a child stolen from us that I know of. We hear about these things on the news. We hear about these awful, awful, awful things. We imagine people in these moments of going, this is it. This is really it. This is the moment. And you sort of imagine, if you can even bring your mind there, what would I do? What would I do? It's almost easier on an airplane where you go, well, I've got maybe 40 seconds or a minute, than to be, let's say, adrift on the ocean and know you have days or weeks with no knowing of what will happen. Where do you find the capacity to deal with this kind of extremity? Well, you may be lucky and something announces itself to you in the moment. Something goes, oh well, or ah so. But more than likely, it will be a moment of panic, clenching, screaming, all of these various things that you use to express yourself, and probably every one of them the last thing you want in facing finality. You don't want to go, if you can help it, into that good night, or whatever you refer to it as, screaming and yelling and kicking. Or maybe you do. But we are all, through this process of meditation, learning how to do the work that Rudy referred to when that Tibetan monk set himself on fire. We are all learning to do that which needs to be done at any given moment, including the last one. Whatever that last moment may be in your life, however it comes, it will involve some kind of work. Rudy would say to get above it, to, in a way, power through it. Or he would say to surrender profoundly. But he said it was work because the human instinct is basically panic, fear, saying no to what is, no to the thing that is an absolute yes. The thing that is, that's happening, is happening. And saying no to what's happening is in many ways the human condition. So much of us go through life saying, I don't want it this way. Turn on the air conditioning. Roll down the window. Turn up the heat. All of us are always adjusting life, all the time. And saying yes to what is to just go, ah so, ah so. Learning to get to ah so, learning to get to yes, learning to get to true surrender is a practice. It's really a practice. And what it takes, the essence of Rudy's work, is sitting still and watching all of this stuff, mind, emotions, feelings, temperature, all of the things that are happening around us, and just sitting still. In the beginning of sitting still, you're lucky to find stillness for 10 seconds. And Rudy's practice is asking for help to surrender for 10 seconds, usually while you're holding your breath, so that you can still your mind a little bit and just really feel absolute letting go. And after about 10 seconds, maybe a little longer, stuff comes in. A thought passes by, a discomfort, an old feeling. And you're kind of gone in it, you're lost in it. And then you practice again to bring yourself back to stillness. After a while, you start to get good at it. You start to actually be able to sit quiet. When you start to sit in silence and stillness, something happens. The first thing that happens is a kind of sense of relief. And what you're really being relieved from is your own mind, your own emotion. Suddenly you're just free of it. And in that freedom, there's a blissful, simple joy of being, just being. The more you surrender, which turns out to be not so much an effort, a muscular act, but a letting go and a relaxation, the more that feeling is sustained. And it's always surprising, because it can go on and on. But almost always it hits some kind of barrier. And that barrier usually has to do with comfort. For example, I've been sitting for an hour and my butt's killing me. My back's killing me. I want to move. After an hour, that bliss is starting to erode a little bit. You know, it's like, okay, enough. I've done this. Now what? The story that you live, always all of our stories, which are really fascinating, have what's on the next page. And clearly sitting still doesn't have a next page. Really? There's no next page. It's just still. Even potentially stillness forever on some level, which is like, oh my God, I don't want stillness forever. You know, I'll take it for an hour. You know, but most of us have a limitation. And we have even a limitation on bliss. Because it's somehow, it's like a good piece of chocolate. You know, it doesn't last. It's hard to sustain bliss for longer than a certain amount of time. And so what happens is you come back into the world, into life, into activity, and you've kind of done what you can do, except that now you're caught back in the world of stuff, of action, of activity, and of mind and emotion and suffering again, because suffering comes from all of that. And so you practice this thing of sitting as often as you can, hopefully, once or twice a day, and you begin to expand the boundaries of that resistance that you have to stillness, and you discover something really remarkable, that you can be still in action. You can be still in the middle of your workday. You can be blissful even when you miss the bus, or the train has just pulled out of the station, or, the air conditioning broke in the car. You can go, oh, I'm okay. Ah, so. And this meditation that was now an hour long is starting to waft into all of the parts of your life. And you start to live differently. You start to have a life where the work is remembering, I can do this. The work is remembering coming back to yourself. The work is taking a breath and letting go of the part of you that's clenching, that's saying no to the moment. The part of you that's going, it shouldn't be this way. You take a breath, and basically it sounds like, so. This is what is. This is what is. It's okay. It's okay. And there is a kind of flowing outward and a kind of embrace of what you are, of what is going on around you. You feel at one with, at peace with, connected with, embraced by life. That's the value of meditation. That's the value of learning to sit still. That's the value of bringing yourself into a place of alignment and letting it be. Surrender. Surrender to what is. That's what this is about. That's what we're here learning how to do. And it works pretty well during most of our experience. And then we start to move beyond certain places that are now a bigger place, let's say, of comfort. You can go from here to here. I don't know if you can see this on the camera, but you can go bigger. And then you start to hit really big extremes, real extremities. What do I do now that I found out that the doctor says I have 5 months to live? What do I do? I'm having an operation. And a few years ago I had an operation, and the pain afterward was worse than they told me it would be. And it lasted for days, and I'm going, whoa, what about all this? Give me stuff. I want my comfort zone again. And they couldn't give me enough for some of the pain. Or they couldn't give it to me fast enough. And I'm going, well, where is my spiritual work? Where's my spiritual practice? Now I'm in real discomfort. I'm in real pain. And it really, really was hard. And I couldn't find my way. I could not find a breathing practice. I couldn't find an aso. I couldn't find anything that would relieve me from the suffering. And that's where the work is. It's really where the work is. And the work, it's second to second to second going, oh God, help me. Help me. Because what else can you do? There's nothing you know how to do. It's not coming from you. Where is it going to come from? It's really, the new work at that point is asking for help. Admitting you're helpless and asking for help. Now, much of our meditation practice actually can go there. We ask for help to surrender. And who exactly are we asking? And what are we asking? Well, if you're a Buddhist, it's one thing. If you're a Christian, it's another thing. A Jew, it's another thing. Everyone has a different idea of what you're asking, but asking is at the core of it. Asking for help is also at the core of it. And when do you ask for help? When you're helpless. And if you don't know to ask for help, you panic. And if help doesn't arrive immediately, you panic. But it's work. It's absolute work for every one of us to find how we can at least implore the universe to deliver help. And my experience in the hospital was that something happened. And all I can tell you is what happened was I suddenly wasn't defined by the pain. I was somehow out of that envelope, separate. That somehow the pain was there and I wasn't. You may have to go to a great extreme in order for that moment to occur. But that moment occurs. And if it doesn't occur by actually releasing you in that moment, it may be through death itself. And no one likes to think about that or talk about that, as death as a release. But that may be the release you're going to get. And if that's the release you're going to get, there are two ways to enter it. One is screaming, yelling, crying, and the other is going, aso, aso. It takes a lifetime of meditation and practice and work to arrive at aso. That really is our work. It's a work that comes from accepting and allowing every moment to be. Allowing it to be. All of this involves us and it. All of this, everything I'm saying is about me asking for help from above within, beyond, to help me, this person. But for some of us, before that moment is dealt with, something else occurs. And that is the awakening. And the awakening is an arrival at a moment where there is no you left, where you are no longer there. There is only what is, period. There is only what is. Interestingly, in that vastness of what is, you are like a molecule. And that molecule seems to be gone, and then you realize, well, it's really not gone. It's just perceived in the vastness of what it truly is. The Hindus describe it as a candle in the sun. We are like candles, but when the sun arises, the candle sheds very little light. We are all vast, vast entities of light, and we think of ourselves as a tiny candle. That little candle is minuscule compared to our true nature. We are all vast oneness. Many people who have arrived at that spot call that the end of death, the release from death itself, because they realize that being that vastness, the individual demise, one, is no longer going to happen, or if it does happen, it's meaningless because you simply return to the vastness that you are, the oneness that you are. And so very many people who have achieved enlightenment talk about it as the release from fear and death. That may be. That may be. My own experience of it is that oneness includes death and life. Oneness includes pain and joy. Oneness includes all there is. Totality, the absolute. So rather than freedom from death, it really is an awareness of the endless implosion and explosion of existence. An awareness of birth and death as a constant. The awareness of life, death, and rebirth as our inheritance. We are that which comes and goes. We are that which is and isn't. That we are that which is full and empty. We are that which is everything and nothing. We are all of these things. We are all there is, and we can't even begin to explain what is. We can't even begin to understand what is. The idea of death in all of this is like incomprehensible, really. However, when pain comes, it focuses you very dramatically. Very dramatically. And at that point, as Rudy said, there's work. And so I will talk for one more moment about what that work must be. Because in my mind, and I've talked about this before, one of the greatest enlightened beings of all time, in my mind, some would call him the true avatar of all time, is Christ. And Christ found out that he was going to be crucified and die. And he had time to look at that. He had time to stare at it in the face. He was in the Garden of Gethsemane, and he said to God, "Please take this from my lips." This infinite entity, this being that exists in all time and space, focused into the body of this man, had fear and suffered and ended up in the worst of all possible painful experiences, I assume, and cried out, "Why have you forsaken me?" And like the Tibetan monk on fire, one can only imagine the work that he is working on to get through the pain that will not go anywhere, that will not end for him in anything but finality. A pain that cannot be relieved by someone giving him a hug or turning on the air conditioner or rolling up the window or any of that stuff. This is a pain that will only end one way. And somewhere in the middle of that horrific experience, which, by the way, may mirror many of our own experiences down the road in various forms, in the middle of that, in a moment that's not described in the Bible or in the New Testament, he goes from, "Why have you forsaken me?" to, "Forgive them, for they know not what they do." If you want to see what work is, it's hanging on a cross and forgiving the people who put you there. Going from being forsaken to saying, "Forgive them." Whatever that transition is, that's what we are here to learn. Awakening, enlightenment, years of meditation, satoris, bliss beyond belief, joy, freedom, liberation, all of that stuff still comes down to extremity for every human being. Some get it lighter, some get it heavier, who knows? But it will come. It will come. And when it comes, you will either be prepared to go aso, or find your way to aso, or you will not. And that's kind of your choice. And it's kind of how you live your life. And it's really sitting every day and meditating is a way of preparing for that end, if you will. But more importantly, meditating every day is a way of arriving at what is. That moment when it comes will be what is. But so is this moment. So is this very moment. And if you're sitting here rejecting this moment, believe me, you will reject that moment. The training ground for spiritual life is learning how to say aso, or yes, to this, over and over and over and over and over. That's how we grow spiritually. That's how we learn to live a life that is full of blessing and grace, not a blessing and grace that comes from outside, but from the acceptance of the grace of what appears to be happening at every given moment. When you keep saying aso, the moment reveals itself to be benign or beautiful or loving or tender or exquisite. It reveals itself to be real. And the amazing thing is being able to get that. The horrible thing is not to ever know that. I can't tell you how most people, and I certainly was one of them, who walk through life moment to moment saying, yuck, not this. Rejecting moments because they're not what they're supposed to be. What do you mean you put butter on my potato? I said no butter on my potato. I see that all the time. You know? I mean, the anger, what do you mean cutting in front of me? You know? The unbelievable anger, the stuff that happens in people, the rejection of the what is, it goes on and on and on, day in, day out. And after a while, it actually becomes part of the whole system. You walk around basically going no all the time. Or, you know, angry at life, angry at what is. And why? Why? Because you bred it into your life, or somebody else bred it into your life. It doesn't matter. But here is an opportunity spiritually to unbreed that, to get rid of that stuff, to let it go away, and you can find in yourself moments occasionally where you can go, so. And trust me, if you get enough of those, you start to have a life that's really different. You have a life that really has within it a kind of unexpected gratitude and beauty and joy and amazement and wonder and mystery. All of that stuff, you get all of that. You don't miss it. You don't get through life having never seen it or tasted it or touched it or smelled it or loved it or embraced it. Because trust me, many people do. They get through life having never known what it was. I always describe it in the old days like listening to a record, and you're not paying attention. When it's over, you realize, I didn't hear that, I didn't hear it. I put on the record, I didn't hear it at all. No, you want to hear it. You want to be there with it. This is it. This is it, right now. And awakening is only to that. You awaken to this, to what is. And trust me, if awakening doesn't happen in the traditional sense, traditional meaning the sudden evaporating of you, if there's still a you and an it, you and an it can have a beautiful dialogue. You can do a beautiful dance. You can have a wonderful life together. And so when the time comes and that you finally disappears, which it will, it won't be a big dramatic moment. It'll be a little blowing out of the candle. You can live a life of the enlightened being spiritually by saying yes endlessly to what is. And then when the big moment comes, extremity, whatever that is, you will find a way. You will find a way. You may be inelegant about it. You may say, please take this from my lips. You may scream and cry because it's painful. And you may ask for help and ask for blessing and ask for release. All of this may happen. But it will be done from a person who is completely alive to it. Not somebody running from it, not somebody cursing it. You will just be it. You'll live it. It will be what you are. And in the end, it is taken from you. There is no way out of it being taken from you. In the end, it's over. What comes after that, I'm not going to talk about. I think we'll all find out, whatever comes after that. But all that matters is, if you arrive at that moment awake, it will be very different than if you arrive at it asleep. And if that moment you arrive at awake, and you don't know what to do with it, it's because you haven't been practicing being present now. Moment to moment, your life is a spiritual practice, and the practice is basically going aso, or yes, or accepting what is. That's it. That's the journey. We're all on it. And, if you practice this now, when that final moment comes, it'll just be another what is. Another yes. You'll grab hold of somebody, or you'll clutch yourself, or you'll reach for God, and you'll reach for joy and peace inside yourself. You'll go, aha, aso. So, I hope this encourages you to pay more attention to your work, whether it be something you practice once a day or something you practice all day long. It's the practice. It's what we're here for. It's what I'm trying to reinforce in you. It's the one thing that we either do or don't do. Coming here, once every 3 months or sitting once every couple times a year will not do it, guys. It just won't do it. If you're not there in the moment now, you're not going to be in the moment later. And at some point, it will really matter. It will really matter. So try to encourage yourself to say yes. Try to show up. Try to be present. Try to love this thing you're going through, because it's real and it's what you've got, and it's not something you can pretend isn't happening. It's happening. Any questions? So. Okay. Thank you, guys. I think we'll have lunch. Oh, your question?
Yeah, I have a question. Well, I thought I was going to die during the meditation.
Well, it didn't happen. Oh, well.
And there was definitely a, why have you forsaken me, and trying to calculate Blanche's reflexes to see if she could catch me if I fell off the chair. But, it seems like in a lot of spiritual people seeking a spiritual life or practicing, they say so without accepting and moving through all the different feelings that come up. And
That may be, but I think the great thing about meditation and sitting still long enough is that stuff starts to come up. It really does. And my experience is that life's going to bring it all up. You don't escape. The aso experience is not to avoid life. It's really to watch it as it presents itself.
Yeah.
And it will present everything.
Right. Like aso to the anger, aso to the
Yes.
insecurity,
Yes.
everything.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
To everything.
Yeah.
Anger, hostility, whatever arises, you have to ultimately go, aso. If you say aso before you act on it, it changes your karma. It makes it present, it's realized, it's observed, and then it goes away. Mostly it goes away. If it doesn't go away, then you may have to say aso for 12 hours. Because that's the only choice you have. But if you act on your anger, if you act on your vengeance, if you act on all these things that come up, then you weave a situation for yourself where the aso becomes very hard to do.
Yeah.
And you really do end up tormented by your life.
Yeah,
You
and
know?
breathing into it. Because I find that, when we're afraid or something, we stop breathing, and but the breath can, help the acceptance process.
The breath is essential.
Yeah.
And I think people learn through this practice to take a breath as a real way of changing the equation. It's not just, it's, you really do take something that's knotted up and getting worse and getting more conflicted and more damning in a way, and you release it so you can flow into the next moment. It's really great teaching. It's one of the great gifts of Rudi's practice, take a breath. And there's other practices that do that, but Rudi's really takes it in. And if you really take a breath, it just opens the doorway to something deep inside. So you're not just freeing yourself of the external, but you're really finding your way into an internal space that really takes you in. We've talked about this before, but the mothering idea, it comforts. It says, you're okay. You're going to be okay. Okay. Anyone else? Thank you all for coming.